those are important to the phasing, and when I get into the phasing, I'll talk a little bit about how those work with Herculaneum.
And this one with the footprint, you'll notice, if any of you recall from the first phase, you notice that a lot of the development has been pulled back from the river. That entire area is with the, not just with the wetlands there, but you notice there's sort of an inland water body, and you know, the Corps sort of liken that to sort of it would be of higher value to U.S. Fish and Wildlife because of that habitat, and that's something that's difficult to recreate somewhere else. You're not just taking an acre of wetland and expanding somewhere else to mitigate it 3-to-1, 6-to-1 ratio. So basically what we try to do is stay out of that as much as possible in terms of this concept. And so that's what the biggest change is in the footprint, and especially trying to stay up north of that, that inland water body because it would be extremely disruptive to a lot of the critical habitat area. And like I said, because it would be considered a higher value, obviously that means the process of any impacts to that would be very costly, extremely complicated, and very time consuming. So trying to sort of balance that with getting the best use there and balancing that with the environmental concerns that would be in that area as well. So I did want to bring that up.
Point. Sir, can I ask one question?
Yes, ma'am.
And it might just be a silly one, but is this the actual Mississippi River here, or is this a channel?
That is the Mississippi River.
This is Illinois over here.
That is Illinois.
There you go. Okay.
I should have labeled those, but yes, there's that's the river. It's actually relatively narrow here, and it's rather fast flowing at times. This phasing is a little difficult to show, to call everything out, but first phase would be two things: one, cutting the notch, and two is prepping the site for the dry bulk terminal. In doing so, we would propose the public dry bulk port as one of the first users of the notch, as well as fleeting, and a barge preparation area, barge repair area on the north. The time frame would be after the initial, in other words, it would be 6 to 10 years or so. After it would follow the initial development in Herculaneum. Cost, and it's mostly excavation, would be $50 million. And this is essentially getting things ready for the next phase. Phase 2 in Crystal City is the big investment, and again, Dan, it would come from the private concessionaire that actually had the terminal, so we wouldn't have to go shaking pockets again.
Well, when we get to that point too, would the railroads probably be involved in, like, the loop?
They may be extremely interested in the loop because they're getting a ton-mile charge on the cargo. So their degree of involvement, I'm not sure, but they certainly would. I mean, if they invested in it, they would expect some return, but not impossible. Generally, at this is, I think, is about 1.6 million, or no, this is 5.5 million tons per year capacity. I think it's a rather conservative capacity estimate. I think it could be pushed to around 7 or so, but at 7 million tons per year, that's the kind of tonnage that you need to justify this size of investment. On the other hand, you're looking at something with better than a 30-year life. So if you can get 30 years of return on 7 million tons a year, you can go to the bank for a pretty good bit of that money.
Chris?
Yes.
Could you give me a location where a mechanized dry bulk operation may be in operation that you can go see one?
Yeah. In Newport News, Virginia, was the model for this one. It's right. It's a few miles from my office. But no. This is a very this layout that you see here, and we'll go back here to this. This layout you see here is a very that's almost like a model layout. This is pretty much how you do it. essentially windrows in the middle. You can increase the capacity by putting berms to make your windrows higher. They've got stacker reclaimers that run on rails and then feed with a conveyor, feed the barge terminal. And then you've got this Lionel train thing going on here that they just keep looping the trains around. In Newport News, the train never stops. This constantly moves. And I think it's doing 12 million tons a year.
Chris,
Yeah.
they do have the Northport and St. Louis, they do have that.
They do have a
coal-
loop track up there, don't they?
coal
Yes, they do.
Facility up there.
Yep, yep.
You could go up and see that.
And they have a mechanized dry bulk loading system.
Yeah, you can see the big,
Clamshell.
what's the big, they call it on?
Well, a reclaimer.
Yeah.
You mean the reclaimer
Yeah.
that it just looks like a big, harvester, and it just grinds up the piles of coal. Is that the one you're? Yeah, it's just a reclaimer. And that's how they're all done now. I mean, very few places that do high capacity use a clamshell type arrangement anymore.
A lot of the fill and stuff they were talking about too, this is to get this to at least the 100-year floodplain. And, you've got existing BNSF rail in the area as well, so basically up to that level. You're talking a good 15-foot fill or so. So, that's the significance of the earthwork and stuff that he's talking about is, and one of the main things is to make sure for port operations you're at least at that level of 100-year floodplain. So, I just wanted to throw that in there too to kind of get you to understand kind of what it's involved.
Yes, sir.
I had a question to the environmental representative. The first two sites to me look like they are brownfields, environmental cleanups. In contrast to those first two sites, this looks like an old farm field and clean as a whistle, no environmental issues. Is that correct?
No. No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood then.
No, because of the previous use with PPG that was there, and the history of the site, it's not a clean site, and so there would be issues. There is a legacy there with some issues of the site there. It's not just nice clean ag land that you can just worry about the bugs and bunnies. You actually do have environmental issues there as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So phase 3, 15 to 20 years out, then is pretty much is what I would call a full build out. And what we've done is we've taken the fact we've got the notch, and we've added general cargo facility to the north to take advantage of the notch. And here's where I was wanting to bring up some of the choices we have in Herculaneum and Crystal City. And one of them is there a market for 2 general cargo terminals, or would it be here or Herculaneum? That I couldn't say. It looks like there's a market for two public dry bulk terminals, but when you get 20 years out or more, the question is, maybe the public dry bulk terminal in Herculaneum would want to be repurposed now into a public general cargo terminal. And instead of putting the general cargo terminal down on the thumb on that vegetated riverfront, you would take and upgrade the facility you have for dry bulk and use that for the general cargo. And then this is actually expandable. So maybe this wants to be the dry bulk center, and that wants to be the general cargo facility because it has the manufacturing and warehousing. And those are questions that I'll just say no one's crystal ball is that good, and mine certainly is not. Those are things that will be determined by the market, by the users, and most importantly, those are things that are going to be determined by what the community wants to do with their port.